Chapter 18. This is just a normal day for you, isn't it? Keith asked as they shivered outside the sanctuary gates, waiting for Counselor Terik to meet them. Go to school, find out you're covered in a dangerous substance, melt off a few layers of skin, and then hail your bestie the counselor, tell him you're ditching study hall to save the world, and he says, "Cool, I'll come with you." "We're not saving the world. We're saving Sylvanie," Sophie corrected as she locked her knees to stop them from shaking. The half-cape of a Foxfire uniform was keeping her shoulders warmer this time, but the skirt plus leggings combo was a lot draftier. At least she wasn't shirtless like Sandor, though he didn't seem affected by the cold. Or maybe he was too busy checking for org tracks. He wrapped his cape tight around his neck, pinning it under his chin to cover every possible inch of skin. It pretty much counts as saving the world, since, if anything happened to Sylvanie, we'd be back to worrying about the timeline to extension. Sophie sucked in her breath. Do you think that's what this is about? What do you mean? Sophie stepped closer, afraid to speak her theory so loudly. Everyone knows how important Sylvanie is to the council. So maybe they're trying to use that to their advantage. Like, as long as they have weapons logged onto her, they can force the council to give them pretty much anything they want. Keith whistled. I hate to say it, but that actually makes sense. Maybe that's why Councillor Terik flipped when you told him. It sounded like he peed himself. Did it? A deep voice asked as Councillor Terik glittered into the path in front of them. The emeralds in his circlet gleamed almost as brightly as the smile he shot to Keith before turning to Sophie. I suppose I was a bit startled by the news, and I'm glad you felt comfortable coming to me. Councillor Terik had programmed Sophie's imparter so it could bypass the security restrictions and reach him any time, but he always seemed surprised when she used it, and he always answered her call. He turned to Sander, who had moved to the side, weapons drawn. Are there any threats in the area? Councillor Terik asked him. Not that I can tell, but I might not be the best person to ask. Apparently, my senses aren't as valuable as I'd once thought. Trust me, Sandor, your senses are still incredibly valuable to me. But we probably should head inside the sanctuary. He motioned for everyone to step forward as he explained. I had Lord Cassius arrange a clearance, so in theory, he took another step forward and the gates clicked open. I love when things go according to plan. That so rarely seems to happen these days. After you? He asked, stepping inside to let Sandor take the lead. Sandor stalked ahead, his sword raised as Sophie, Keith, and Councillor Terik followed. The warm, sunny paradise felt colder this time. But maybe that was because Sophie kept trying to guess how much force an org missile would need to collapse the mountain walls above them. They'd only gone a few spaces before Terik stepped through a clump of bushes. His wild hair was pulled back into a simple braid, and he dropped to a bow in front of Councillor Terik. I've sedated the Alicon as you instructed. They're waiting for you in their pastures. He glanced at Sophie as he turned to lead the way. His face a mask of fear and betrayal. Guilt reminded her of her promise to protect him from the council. But what choice did she have? This was bigger than all of them. Sophie had tried to prepare herself to see Sylvanie unconscious, but her eyes still welled with tears when she did, and not sad tears, angry tears. This was the second time she'd seen Sylvanie drugged because of the rebels. She had to make sure it was the last. She feels calm, Keith promised, tracing his fingers along Sylvanie's neck. And doesn't feel like she was stressed while he sedated her either. It's more like she just dozed off without realizing it. Yes, I do know how to sedate and Terik started cutting himself off when he glanced at Councillor Terik. Then he switched to another deep bow and quietly said, I was told there was a powder I should use to test the alicons. I have it. Sophie dug through her pockets and pulled out the vial of Revel dust. She showed Terik how to sprinkle a thin layer over Greyfell's limp body, then went to treat Sylvanie, ignoring Keith when he called dibs on the top half. For all the times he'd called her Glitterbud, he got to deal with the tail. Plus, she wasn't sure she could handle seeing the Aramark glow. She'd barely begun dusting Sylvanie's mane when Keith whispered, "Oh," and Councillor Terik said, "So it's true." At least, the rest of Sylvanie's body turned out to be clear. Still, the halo of red from the skin around Sylvanie's tail was the brightest she'd ever seen. Gray feels safe, Jurek announced as he rejoined them. I checked twice to be sure. I guess they only want the girl. Of course, they know she's the most valuable, Sophie grumbled as she handed Jurek a vial of pinkutine. This stuff will remove it, but it's a creepy process. Elvin explained all the gory details. Sophie backed away as he moved towards Sylvanie, heading for a part of the path that curved enough to block Sylvanie from her view. I can't watch, she whispered as Eve joined her. Neither can I. I think that makes three of us, Counselor Terik agreed, coming to stand beside them. I've witnessed many difficult things in my day, but that magnificent creature. Do you think she's going to be okay? Sophie asked. Of course she will. Everything worked out for us, right? Keith held up his hands, wiggling his fingers. Yes, they weren't alicorns. Sylvanie's skin had a totally different composition. Then again, Sophia and Sylvanie did share parts of their DNA. Girl, you're worrying enough to make us both sick, Keith told her, clutching his stomach. You can feel what she's feeling? Counselor Terik asked, his brows shooting up when Keith nodded. Clearly you have your father's gift. You remind me of him, actually. Although, he stroked his chin, his cobalt blue eyes boring to Keith's. There's much of your mother in you as well. It will be interesting to see who you take after. Hopefully neither, Keith mumbled. Counselor Terik smiled. We all wish to separate ourselves from our families when we are teenagers, but as you grow up, you learn to appreciate them. I doubt that. Several awkward seconds passed, then Counselor Terik asked Keith. So what do you want to be then? Keith shrugged. Any openings in the nobility for a professional troublemaker? That heard him laugh, and Counselor Terik placed a hand on Keith's shoulder. Don't sell your short, Keith. I see great potential in you. You adults love to tell me that. Yes, but I say it with a bit more authority. Need I remind you of my ability? Counselor Terik was a disgracer, the only one in the entire elven world, which meant he was able to sense and interpret the potential of anyone he touched. Keith glanced at Counselor Terik's hand on his shoulder. Did you just take a reading of me? Couldn't resist, he admitted. I don't often perform them, since I've found that knowing your potential tends to hinder ability to live up to it. But I must admit, you fascinate me. Of course I do. Keith's grin was extra smug, but for all his bravado, Sophie could tell that Counselor Terik's words had affected him deeply. Well, you don't fascinate me as much as she does, Counselor Terik admitted, pointing to Sophie. Hers was the only reading I couldn't translate. Everything I felt was too divided. Divided how? Sophie and Keith asked at the same time. But if I told you that, it might influence you. Best to let you choose for yourself. Wow, you're kind of evil, aren't you? Keith asked. Counselor Terik laughed. Once upon a time, I wasn't all that different from you. He winked as he turned to call to Jurek. How's it going over there? I think I'm done, though I'd like to test the area with Revel dust just to be safe. Sophie brought him the vial of powder, though she nearly tripped it when she got a closer look at Sylvanie. Wow, Keith said, coming up beside her. Guess I can't call her glitter butt until her fur grows back. How do you think she'd feel about bald booty? Sophie looked away from the pinkish furless hide. I think she'd hate it as much as I do. Can one of you put the Revel dust on the area? Can one of you put the Revel dust on the area? Jurek asked. My hands still have traces of the pinkutine on them. I'll do it, Keith offered before Sophie could find the courage to do the same. She tried to thank him as he sprinkled the silver powder over Sylvanie's bare skin, rubbing it in with circular strokes. But every time she opened her mouth, her voice wanted to dissolve into a sob. The only thing that snapped out of it was when she noticed Keith's hands. What? Keith asked as she gasped. It's Sylvanie. His voice trailed off as he realized what she'd seen. He'd gotten the rebel dust on his skin when he dropped it onto Sylvanie, and his fingertips were glowing vivid red.